As the transition to a low carbon future accelerates, investors care about whether a company can grow and meet the challenges of sustainability. But they also want to see solid returns in all types of market environments. On this IBD Explains, we dive into IBD's 2024 special report on the 100 most sustainable companies and how investors can use sustainability scores to find the right green stocks to grow their portfolios. Sustainable investing is on the rise. Nearly 80% of global investors say they take into account a company's commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions before making an investment. Public companies that made the IBD 2024 100 Most Sustainable Companies list combined strong climate management scores from Morningstar Sustainalytics with IBD technical and fundamental stock ratings.
The idea behind the Morningstar Low Carbon Transition Leaders Index is that there's going to be a part to play from every sector and every part of the industry in the transition to a low carbon economy. And we recognize that there's going to be leaders in every sector.
That's Rob Edwards. He leads the product management team for Morningstar's global ESG indexes. He says that the Low Carbon Transition Leaders Index offers investors a best-in-class selection of companies angling to be leaders in the climate transition.
We want to give investors really exposure to these companies that are really making progress while giving them, I would call, kind of a sector neutral exposure to the entire economy.
IBD used these new indexes from Morningstar to target the top half of the best scoring companies from each sector by market cap. The list focuses on companies that report carbon emissions and are reducing their carbon intensity, as well as those whose business activities contribute positively to the environment.
At its core, we are assessing the actions a company is taking to transition to a low carbon economy.
That's Anya Solaviva. She leads the global commercial strategy for the Climate Solutions Unit at Morningstar Sustainalytics, a leading global independent provider of ESG and corporate governance research, ratings, and analytics.
We're also looking at elements about how they're managing their supply chain emissions and what kind of investments they're making into low carbon technologies to support their transition. But then we're also using that management score to essentially undertake a projection of future expected emissions.
IBD's 2024 Most Sustainable Companies reviews businesses not solely on their sustainability and climate management achievements, but also on how they fare against their competitors in similar industries.
When you're thinking about the low carbon transition, it's not just about companies that are low carbon today, but it's about those high emitting sectors and really identifying those companies in the high emitting sector. So your oil and gas, aviation, transportation, and really trying to identify the companies that, again, are taking their own transition risk seriously and are taking steps to manage that transition risk.
I think if you look at all of the other climate indexes that have been historically available, a lot of them actually really underweight or completely avoid high emitting sectors like the energy sector, with the idea that you want to completely avoid these high emitters. We're not just looking to avoid or reduce the overall kind of portfolio or index level emissions. We want to find companies that are taking real action today towards the future of a low carbon economy.
So what are some benchmarks investors can look for to see if a company is seriously addressing climate change related issues?
One of them is looking at a company's emissions. So we're looking at essentially how well companies related to their peers are addressing their current emissions, but also on a more forward-looking basis, we're looking at things like investment alignment. And really what we mean by that is things like capital expenditures. So are companies actually investing to improve or change their business model to align with a more low carbon economy?
So Laviva says there's one metric investors should really key in on.
Focusing in on climate governance in particular, I think is really critical because, again, a company can make fantastic, ambitious commitments and target, but if there's not the climate governance in place or the commitment from management in order to be able to deliver on that, very likely the company is actually not going to be able to achieve those stated objectives.
Climate governance can encompass board oversight of climate risk and CEO pay that's linked to meeting climate targets. So Laviva adds that analyzing how companies view and address climate implications within their supply chain is crucial as well.
For companies, for example, like Apple or pharmaceutical companies, where they really have the majority of their carbon footprint is driven by their supply chain emissions, it's important to start to understand what actions a company is starting to take to decrease those emissions.
Though there's been some political backlash to ESG investing, it seems to have little bearing on where investors are actually putting their money. A majority of individual investors say they plan to increase their allocations to sustainable companies in the coming year, while more than 70% believe strong sustainability practices can lead to higher returns. So, how can investors become better educated around issues related to climate change and the impact it may have on their investment portfolio?
When it comes to the low carbon transition, there are leaders and laggards in every sector. And in order for portfolio or investor to really kind of capitalize on the low carbon transition, it's not just about investing in green companies or maybe companies that are deemed low carbon today, but it's really about kind of identifying those companies, particularly in high emitting sectors, that are well positioned to reduce emissions over time and therefore will be kind of the leaders of the future.
For more information or to see the full IBD list of the 100 most sustainable companies, go to investors.com/sustainability.